All right, babes, it's Bimini and welcome to The Pieces. Today, we have a gorgeous guest, a bold and fearless voice in music, the frontman of the Scissor Sisters, who has made waves as an artist that celebrates queer identity in the mainstream, breaking barriers in pop music with his unapologetic expression. From chart-topping albums to his theatre and solo work, Jake's story is about a musician, an artist whose journey is just as colourful and layered as his sound and stage persona. Babes, it's Jake Shears. Babes, it's Jake Shears.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you, Bimini?
Oh my God, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so
Thank you
excited.
for having me.
I feel like I'm weirdly nervous because you're such a huge inspiration to me. I don't know
feel
if
like
you know
I'm
that.
a little bit nervous.
But we're good.
We're
This is
good.
a
It's good to
gorgeous
see you.
white safe space here.
You look fantastic.
Thank you. I've got my leather and latex
You look
on.
amazing.
I feel like this is something you would wear.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, I don't know if I would not in the daylight hours, probably. Or probably on a stage. You know what? I don't really dress up that much in my daily life. I'm a real schlub.
Well, I like to be comfortable, so that's why I've taken my shoes off. I'm all sat here now, cross-legged. Well, I want to get to the story for you, because The Pieces is all about identity. Yeah. And you are somebody that I feel like really has expressed their identity on stage. And I want to get to that, but also who you are as well, you know?
Yeah.
So I want to start to little Jake Shears from Arizona.
Yeah.
So you were born in Arizona.
Yep.
Then you moved to Seattle.
Yep.
As a teenager.
On a tiny little island north of Seattle, and then spent my last couple years of high school in Seattle. But I was kind of back and forth to Arizona. My parents were sort of nomads.
Oh, cool.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I sort of occupied both places. My mom and dad, they would love to travel around the country in their motorhome. We had a Winnebago, and we'd go up and down, and yeah. So I spent a lot of time in Arizona too. I came out in Arizona.
Wow. Okay. How old was that?
I was about 15. Yeah, I was 15.
Okay, cool. So then you moved to Seattle from then. So those 15 years in Arizona, you're traveling around. What was that like?
It was
growing up
like,
in that?
well, it was like when I was born to when I was about 8 years old, we moved up to the island. Then when I was 15, I went back down to Arizona, and then went back up to Seattle. I mean, it was a great, growing up on the island. It was about 3,000 people. I mean, in the wintertime.
Oh, wow.
So there was about 60 kids in my grade. There'd be two classes for each grade school. So it was a really small place. Mm-hmm. But it was one of the most beautiful places on earth. It's really a gorgeous place to grow up.
That sounds like an incredible way to grow up.
I grew up with killer whales, out in the front yard, basically. It was just it was an amazing spot, and it was kind of undiscovered at the time. I mean, as time went on, tech really got big, Microsoft up in that part of the world. So the island kind of got sort of invaded by really rich people and building these crazy houses, and the feeling of it changed. But I ended up, after I came out in Seattle, in the mid-90s, which was an amazing place to be and an amazing time period to be there.
How was that coming out of 15?
It was intense.
Because that was in the 90s, I feel like, I guess it was kind of after the AIDS epidemic as well.
It was still going.
It was still going.
Yeah,
coming out of that age would have been quite.
It was super intense. I mean, I was at the time living away from my parents with a family friend who had been an art teacher of mine, who's still kind of my sister. Her name's Jennifer. But I was living away from my mom and dad. I was on this weird phone line all the time, this pre-internet chat room, and in Phoenix, which was kind of a very conservative place at the time, but also sort of there was a really great underground there. And for some reason at 15, I was able to kind of find some of my people. There was a lot of crystal meth going on around that time, and some of my best friends at school were using, and thankfully no one offered it to me at the time. So I was around a lot of stuff when I was a teenager, but for some reason, I feel like I had like some angels looking after me or something, because I never got into any trouble, you know, and I don't feel like anyone ever, at that time too, at 15, sort of running around in the underground of a place like Phoenix, like I feel like I could have been really taken advantage of, probably in bad ways.
For sure,
and,
I think at that age, yeah.
Yeah, and that nothing like that happened to me. So I feel very thankful that I was able to sort of have the room to...
Well, it sounds like it was quite free.
Yeah, except for school. Like I went to this massive school. There was about 3,000 kids. It was, I'd say the majority of the students were Mormon. It's like a heavy Mormon population. I was the only out kid at the entire school.
That's something.
It was like people my age weren't coming out and saying that they were queer.
Were you quite, would you say, fearless?
Oh, I was like antagonistic. So
that's a great trait to be.
I was just like ratting my hair out. I was wearing skirts. I was covered in chains and like having fun with it. But it was sort of antagonistic, and it wasn't necessarily the best idea for me to be doing that. It didn't really, how can I say this? It just wasn't very safe.
Yeah. I feel like, I guess if you're so young and you're starting to use fashion as an expression and kind of being very bold and fearless, where do you think that came from? If you are in that place, you're around these people like Mormons and like that's very religious, and there's a lot of crystal meth, there's a lot of drugs happening. It's quite, where did that come from?
I had a big personality since I was a little kid. You know, I had a really wild sense of humor. I was always a big ham, and I always needed a lot of attention. Being
someone that can just be themselves so young, I think it's because you hear so many stories, and I know from my own experience, like I came out around 14, 15. But even then it was hard. I feel like I started expressing with fashion probably like 15, 16 years old.
Yeah.
But I feel like that was like 15 years ago, 16 years ago. So I feel like in the 90s, just being that and like owning that, were there anyone you were looking to? Like any kind of, what was inspiring you to like, with the fashion? Or was it just like innate almost?
Well, this was, Nirvana had broken by this time, but I was really, really, really into music. And what was great is at the time, the Phoenix area was really everyone was stopping through. Now it's not as big of a tour spot. Like bands don't really visit Phoenix as often. I mean, there just used to be like this real sort of musical middle class of all these acts that were coming over from the UK. So I was just going to concerts all the time. And that was going to shows was my main place to go out and look at other weirdos and see other people and see other people express themselves. You know, because there was no internet. The only way to see that was like in person or to like find magazines. You know, find a Q magazine or something from over here. It was, everything was so much more valuable in real life, if that makes any sense. And like there was a couple little stores that you'd go to like get your bondage belts and to get your band t-shirts that like Hot Topic, and I don't know if you know Hot Topic over here, but like that hadn't really proliferated in the same way. So it was cool. I really loved that time. I was so excited as well as scared. You know, like we were saying earlier, like the cocktail hadn't even been created for people with HIV and AIDS yet. So gay people it was just like this heavy association. And like you sort of grow up with this like fear, seeing, you know, death being so heavily associated with gay men. It does something to you as a kid, as a teenager, and how you feel about yourself and how you feel about sex. But yeah, there's definitely like a window there. The cocktail came out when I'll never forget. I've been doing a lot of, when I moved back to Seattle, I've been doing a lot of like queer youth outreach, right? We were throwing like queer youth parties with, you know, safer sex demonstrations, and like I was a condom poster boy my senior year of high school. And I'll never forget, I was about 18 or 19, and I worked at a movie theater, this really cool little movie theater I loved so much. And I was reading the paper while I was on break, and there's the article on like the cocktail, the beginning of the next phase, and it was saving people's lives. And I remember just how exciting that was to read that. And that was the beginning of the next phase. So there was just a few years there that it was, I wasn't of the age to have like, of course, like lost all my friends like generations before us did.
So many artists and so many people gone, yeah. But
it was more, there weren't that many kids around the same age that were out. It was frustrating for me because I couldn't date anybody. I was like, where's my boyfriend? I want a boyfriend, but there just weren't any there. But like there'd be other kids doing like the queer outreach with me, and then like 2 weeks later we'd come back for the meeting and they never came back.
That's so sad.
So it was like it's not like I had like any best friends that died, but like there were teenagers around me that were gone. So that's just like an intense. It's
really intense.
It's an intense thing to kind of grow up with.
And you coming out at that age, what do you think it was that did that? Because it would have been a really hard time to do that and be yourself and be bold and be fearless.
Yeah.
What was it that you just were authentic?
It's a funny one. I think I just had to be me.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be myself. And even though, the excessive fashion, for lack of a better word, and I was literally finding like whatever I could get my hands on. I'd go to school with a purse on my head, and like I needed attention. Like I said earlier, that was something that I needed, and I learned in my life how to funnel that into a career.
Yeah, amazing. I feel like I always say that. I was like, when people ask me about being younger, I was like, I was an attention seeker from early on.
Yeah.
Like, I remember being a kid doing cartwheels in the supermarkets when my mum's like doing her shopping. She'd be like, stop it.
Yes.
Like, so annoying, but I'm like, I feel like that's just it. And then I've also been able to do that on stage. And I think it's just like that ability to want to show off.
Yeah.
And have fun.
Yeah. That need for attention when we're that young. You and I have channeled and funneled that into something really positive for, I think, hopefully the world around us.
Yeah.
And to be inspiring for people. And that's super important. I think that can also get funneled into rough channels as well. I think growing up with like that need for attention, I'm sure there's like loads of people that act out in wild ways with that need for attention. You could be destructive with that as well, is what I'm saying.
Well, I definitely know that for me, you could be destructive. You could be. I think sometimes I've lent on self-destruction, which has not been great. Because I think also as queer people to navigate that system and this world,
of course,
difficult. And
absolutely.
I think a lot for me, and I'm sure you did as well, because I know when you went to New York, you're in a club scene, you kind of find your people in those clubs and those spaces.
You sure do.
And it can have that double-edged sword.
Yes.
And I feel like for me, like, something that I think Scissor Sisters and you represented was something that Sink the Pink had. This like kind of punky, queer, radical energy. Yeah. But you were doing it like 2003. 2003 was when the album came out.
The beginning of 2004 is when the album came out. But we were, we started up in like, our first shows were 2001, the end of 2001.
In New York?
Yeah.
So talk to me about that. How did this New York scene start?
Well, I was having so much fun. I moved to New York when I was 20 and was doing creative writing. I was writing fiction. I thought I was going to be a fiction writer, even though I loved music so much, and music was just a huge passion for me. And I had a little band in high school and stuff, but I thought I was going to be writing fiction. I'm just a massive fan of literature and books, and I read a lot, and that's what one of my passions in life. So that's what I was doing. But at the same time, I was go-go dancing, which was really fun. I loved being out. I just loved nightlife. I loved the East Village in New York was having this sort of resurgence. Sex was back.
Yeah.
You know, it was when I hit New York, it felt like we had this bar called The Cock. This guy Mario Diaz was throwing parties, and it felt like sex was back. And it had been something that sort of queer people had it's kind of been shut down for so long, you know, with just the impact of AIDS, that like it was suddenly this really exciting moment. But I was go-go dancing, I was in school, I was also into this crowd of kids that were at the experimental theater wing at NYU. So I was getting cast in their shows. I also had this weird little education on the side of doing these plays with other kids, these weird plays at NYU. So I was kind of doing all those things. And Baby Daddy was one of my dear friends. We've been friends for years. We met when we were like 18. And he was living in New York as well. He was going to Columbia. He was also studying creative writing. And he just had gotten this music, he just started learning Logic. This is like early days of Logic before Apple even owned it. You know what I mean? So he was, and he's a brilliant guy and able to do that stuff. I mean, I'm not a technical person, you know? So we started writing these really stupid songs. And when people ask me, like asking for advice on writing music, or they're really trying to write, my advice to people, if you're just beginning to write, is just write the stupidest things. You could just make yourself laugh, first and foremost.
I feel like if anyone doesn't know the full lyrics to Filthy Gorgeous, they're the best lyrics ever. I remember because I've covered that and I've like done it, and I remember learning properly the lyrics. And like when you trip and you fall on a tab of acid.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's so good. Like the lyrics are just genius. I think that's fun. That's about that, right?
Yeah, and it's a super fun song. I was just sort of like writing about the world around me, writing about my life and times, as it were. And we just started writing really stupid songs, and the towers fell. Front row seats. You know, I was in Soho that morning, and like I was in New York. I was just out of college, and you know, the city unraveled. Like, we didn't go anywhere. I didn't leave the city. But strangely, like, the people that stayed in New York right after 9/11, like, there was nothing to do but go out and kind of be with one another. So this sort of nightlife, not immediately after, but like nightlife turned into this really interesting free-for-all after that happened, because I think people were just like, the world's ending. Like, what have we got to lose now? Like, the city is completely undone. So it was during that moment. And I think it was like September 21st, 2001. It was 10 days after 9/11. That Baby Daddy and I had made this really dumb song called Bicycle of the Devil. We were just sitting there. I didn't have a job. You know, I can't even remember what he was doing. But I remember saying, why don't we go perform this? Like tomorrow night at this night at the Slipper Room that I knew of. And so that was like our first little performance. So it kind of came out of this need and desire to cheer people up in a rough time.
I can hear that in the music. I feel like Scissor Sisters have got such timeless music, and it is fun.
It's fun.
It's so fun.
And I think during like that time right there, like I think maybe many people would be compelled to go out and sing a really sad song or like something. But we did something that was like really irreverent.
And people need that.
I that's what we discovered that night.
Yeah.
You know, we did this really stupid song with a strobe light. I was wearing a bathrobe with a jockstrap on underneath. You know what I mean? Just Baby Daddy had like steampunk goggles on. It was just like really lame, but it cheered people up.
And how did the rest of the band form at the time?
Well, there's a video of that night somewhere, and Anna was an MC at that club, so she introduced us, and Dell. I was had this friend that I kind of dated off and on named David Russell, who's an amazing music manager now and still a great friend. But one of his best friends he grew up with was Del Marquis. And Del had also come out really young. Mm-hmm. He'd come out at 15. And so we had that sort of, generationally, we had stuff in common and a lot of music in common. And he joined the band with, playing guitar. And sort of that's how we all formed.
So this is 2001.
Yeah.
And then the album came out, was it February 2004?
February 2004.
Yeah. And in that process, what was that journey like? Kind of getting on stage together, writing music?
It was really interesting because, I was kind of involved in these scenes. Electroclash was going on, and there were these parties, and like everybody was like getting up and singing their own songs that they'd made at home. And so I just saw this stage, and I was like, let's just keep making songs and playing them, and still being silly. And accidentally, I think we started writing stuff with like a bit of levity. Mm-hmm. People were really enjoying our shows, which we weren't taking that seriously, but we were having fun. And also it was a very electronic sort of electro scene. Mm-hmm. And we started introducing pianos in the music and guitars. So we weren't doing what everyone else was doing. So we just started sticking out a bit, which I think is also great advice I give to young people. If you can find a scene, if you can find a stage to get on it, but do something totally different from what others are doing.
For sure. I think especially because you're essentially a queer band.
Yeah.
Creating music, being very unapologetic. Do you feel like there was anyone else around the time, or did you look to any other bands as like inspiration? Or were they queer, or is it just...
I think my biggest inspirations at the time, in the immediate moment, the first wave had just happened of Fisher Spooner, mm-hmm. Casey Spooner, and like Peaches,
yep.
and Chicks on Speed. And like those artists to me were like really big touchstones. Mm-hmm. And going to go see Peaches play and her sort of persona on stage and what she was doing, and like her lyrics were so silly and sexual and unapologetic, provocative, and her performances were like scary and funny and like all these things at once. And that to me was just really inspiring. So I don't know if we would have even existed kind of without that first wave of sort of electro artists, really. So they were all really inspiring. And then I was discovering classic rock. So like I was into all that. And at the same time, I was listening to Pink Floyd and Elton John, and even just like new wave stuff like Human League, and just anything I could get my hand, Wham! Just I was really going back, and Steely Dan, and and just constantly in record shops, just listening to older music. I've never really been into, I know this is like sacrilegious of me to say, but I've never really been into contemporary pop music, whatever era I've been in.
But would you say Scissor Sisters became pop?
Definitely.
For sure,
definitely.
But without meaning to.
Kind of, yeah. But I feel like I really try to write timeless music and timeless songs, and I love songcraft, and I also love dance music. Mm-hmm. So, it's sort of this conflagration of... Is that a word? Conflagration? It's this mixture of stuff mm-hmm. that is kind of, I think with my songwriting, with Scissor Sisters, with my solo stuff, mm-hmm. I feel like I've got my own special brew stylistically that I think is pretty unique.
For sure. I feel like, so looking at across all of the Scissor Sisters work, and also your album Jake Shears and Last Man Dancing, what would you say is your favourite song you've written?
My favourite song I've written? Oh my goodness.
Maybe solo and then maybe band.
Well, no, I think in general, I'll look at something like Laura off of the first Scissors record. And what's so special about those songs to me is that they really came from this very innocent place, this very sort of naive, innocent, fun place. There was no pressure on those songs were just kind of spilling out of me, of us. And there's something to me that's really special about that you can never replicate again, really. I think once sort of big success hits, it's just never going to be like that again.
Did you feel pressure to try to...
After that?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? It like ruined my life for a while. It was so heavy. I experienced an immense amount of anxiety and depression after that whole first round. I mean, we toured for 2 years and we pushed ourselves so hard. And coming out the other end of that, you know, you get home and there's no ticker tape parade outside. I'm sure you know how this feeling. It's like you end up like back in your bedroom or something and you're just like, did that even just happen? Like, what am I supposed to do now? I mean, nothing can really prepare you for that. And I think what I learned and what I had to learn during that time, what I had to learn for some years afterwards, was that I could not equate my self-worth with whatever success I was having, whether it was writing songs that I liked, whether it was making stuff that other people liked, whether it was charting. Like I attached my self-worth so much to like notoriety and what other people thought of me. I think that combination is a recipe for disaster and depression, and it can really sink you. And I felt like that happened to me. And come around like 2009, 2010, I finally like shed that and just realized that the most important thing is just to make things that you absolutely love, that you're super proud of. You'll never have any regrets if that's what you do. And I've sort of lived my life like that ever since. And I've never had those issues again, or that kind of depression or that kind of anxiety. It's been gone since I sort of separated those things.
How did you get through that?
Psychiatry, antidepressants. I didn't know what else to do. I mean, it really was, it was debilitating. I was getting this like physical anxiety that it was, I think also just the adrenaline from going on stage all the time. It was so weird. Like I would finish tours and anytime the temperature would raise a little bit, my whole body would just get drenched in sweat. So like my endocrine system was completely off. Like I was constantly just breaking into these intense sweats just from being on stage and sweating all the time. So like my system would be like really, really out of whack. And the anxiety that I felt at the time was like, it felt like I was dipping off a roller coaster constantly. It would happen twice a minute. It was just this like rush it was a physical thing that I would feel. And I think it would just get it was just the worst feeling and it just kept happening. And I think it just fed into this cycle and it made me depressed because I just felt I'd feel that like stomach drop, all day long. And I think that just was just like a cycle of depression. I finally like.
Did you realize it was depression at the time?
It took me a while to figure that out.
Did you have people around you?
You know who it was? It was Elton.
Really?
It was Elton, who was like, I remember I was on the phone with him and he just basically said, this is what you're going to have to do. He was like, I feel like he's the one who really called it. And I'm really thankful for that. I don't know if I would have sought out help when I did if it hadn't have been for him. Because he could, of course, spot it. He's been around for a while. He knows what I was going through, So like he was able to, see it and able to really tell me and help me get where I needed to get.
Elton's always been quite a big inspiration for you.
Yes.
So having that someone to like become like a bit of a mentor,
yes,
must have been incredible.
Well, he just like really, he's always been an amazing friend, and I think we've always been there for each other. I think I've been there for him as well, And we love each other very much. We make each other laugh. We love working together. We love writing together. I mean, he's hilarious and he's such a weirdo. There's just like, he really is truly like an amazing, touched weirdo, who has no filter. And like, he's incredible.
His story is amazing too. And I feel like what he gives back to as well. So good.
He really does. I think he hit a point in his life where he was like, what, and the mentorship on younger musicians and like him reaching out, it's just, it's invaluable. He's just so generous. And I'm really thankful for him in my life and David, both of them. They've just been amazing friends. Yeah. So having him just during that time was vital for me. I don't know what I would have done without him. And I don't know what I don't know what I would do in my life without him, if that makes any sense. Like, I can't imagine my life with him not in it.
So you're currently working together now?
Yeah.
On the Tammy Faye musical?
Got a show on Broadway.
Amazing. How is that going?
It's intense. It's good. I'm immensely proud of it.
How is writing for stage and theatre compared to like stage in kind of the musical world, if you're not?
I mean, sort of the difference between scissors or solo and that. I mean, it's a completely different beast. The director, Rupert Gould, has really pushed me in an amazing way. I have learned so much from this round. This is my second musical I've made, and I have the amount I've learned from it. I really feel like I'm going to be able to carry that on into the next stuff. The lyrics have been I have carved these lyrics within an inch of my life. When we're recording this right now, the show locks tomorrow. So,
wow.
There's still 2 lines in the show. There's 2 lines that I'm down to 2 lines right now that I'll probably send in alternates for them today. But I've really just carved those lyrics into the sculpture that it is. And it's funny right now because the show is about evangelicals, which is a very strange time right now to have a musical about evangelical Christians. So I'm very curious as to what people are going to think of it in this moment. I feel like...
How was it going back to New York during all of this?
Well, it was fine. I feel like people were hopeful last time I was in New York, which was just a few days ago. Now the elections happened, and I'm dreading going back. And I'm very curious with this show. It's going to be seen through an entirely new filter now, which will be interesting. I think it's very timely, for better and for worse. So, who knows? But that's the magic of making art. But musical theater is the most challenging thing you can ever take on, I think. It's the amount of detail, the amount of people that, like, just the blood, sweat, and tears from hundreds of people go into this thing. And it's all got to line up. And there's no shortcuts. There's no computer that can make it go faster. There's nothing you can do to make it go faster. Like, it's an amazing, I love it, but Lord, it's intense.
And is Elton composing the music?
Yeah.
Amazing. How was that process, you two working together been?
It was a blast. I mean, we started like 11 years ago on it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Made most of it in the same room. I brought in it's funny, like us doing the demos together, the lyrics are so different now from the demos. I mean, it's just like they were basically lyrical sketches. Making the demos, we'd basically record it like an album in the moment, with like engineers and other players. And, every day we would be coming up with songs. And it's just like a really joyful thing to do. It would be really fun. It'd be like a bubble vacation where we'd go in the studio for a week and just work,
I want to get out to New York and see it if I can.
Yeah, you
sure.
I would love for you to see it.
When does it start, did you say?
It opens on
previews at
November. It's in previews right now. Yeah, it's going to open November 14th.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So going back, I know you'd obviously spoken about like after the first album, for years you kind of had some battles, but were there some amazing times as well?
Oh
Some
my
of the
God.
most amazing times.
Yeah, I was in love.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I fell in love with this guy named Chris McCarbell. We were together for 11 years. We built we made a life together, you know, and had a dog and, you know, a house. And, you know, that was just amazing. Like, we had a really great, you know, I don't know if anything's ever going to like touch that again. Part of me wishes, you know, we'd done things differently eventually, but we're still really close. Love him very much. And he's really brilliant. But that was amazing, like having a strong relationship like that for a good while at least. But then there was just great times with I love performing. Getting on stage was like getting let out with like off the leash. Stage felt like getting off the leash. You know what I mean? It felt like getting to your owner takes you to the dog park and lets you go. I felt like a puppy on stage. And I think I am very much a puppy on stage still.
Are you excited to do it all again?
I am.
20 years after the first album.
Yeah.
You're about to go on tour with Scissor Sisters.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
I feel great. We're doing 10 arena shows in the UK. It's going to be a blast. It'll be really fun to play some of these songs that I haven't sung in a really long time. And I think it'll be really fun to perform with this filter again. With it, I don't want to say with this filter. I mean, I think it'll be really fun to perform with this lens. I feel to me like Scissor Sisters was always kind of felt like a lens. And there came a point where I was like, I've taken all the pictures I want to off this lens. I need to change my lens. And now I feel like opening the drawer and pulling out that lens and putting it back on the camera is going to be really, really, really fun.
It must be amazing to get back on there and do it. But obviously Anna's not going to be joining.
Yeah, which is going to be a very different dynamic. Which is, I mean, she's going to be there in spirit, of course. Her spirit's always going to be there in this music and in the spirit of our shows. It's going to be a challenge, but a good one that I'm really excited about, you know, figuring out what that new dynamic is. But like, I love the phrase, and it's something that I've always sort of lived by, is you can never go home again. Nothing is ever the same. Nothing is ever going to stay the same. And that includes this. It's gonna be different, but I think different is good. You got to change.
Have you worked out how the trio are gonna do it? Have you been like discussing like the set list, performances?
Yeah.
I'm excited to see it. I'm definitely gonna take my mum.
Lots of meetings. Bring mom.
Yeah.
Bring mom.
Jacked up on some cheap champagne.
Yes, and that's the fun thing about our shows is that I feel like they're really for everyone. And they're, you know, you can go and get off your face and be, you know, exude faggotry if you want to.
Absolutely.
Or you could be like a Nan that like wants to come with her grandkids. It's like both of those things work at our shows. And that's what I love about the band is that it's a broad swath.
Well, that album in particular was the biggest selling album of 2004 in the UK.
Yeah.
And my mum used to play the album all the time. I was 11 years old. That's how I first got introduced to you and your music. And I remember hearing the lyrics and like, I don't know, finding them very like rebellious. And like, I was like, this is so cool. So I'm excited to come and see the show. Are you ready for it?
I mean, not yet.
Not yet.
No, it's going to take a while to like, these things take a long time to put together. So for one thing, I'm probably in the worst shape right now I've ever been in my life. I finished Cabaret with just like injuries, you know? So I've been having to like repair stuff just after doing 200 shows.
You're
8
amazing
shows
at that,
a week.
by the way.
Thank you.
So good.
Thank you. But like it was really hard on my body. So I've been having to kind of like repair from that. And then it's going to take a training. To get where I need to get, to be running across those arena stages, you know.
What, a 90-minute, 2-hour set?
It'll be, it's going to be between those.
It's a lot of cardio.
It's a lot of cardio. But, you know, I want to do this for as long as I possibly can. I have this, like, vision of, like, someday in the future of being out on stage shaking it, like, really old. And I think of people sitting out in the audience being like, there he still is. He's still there. You know, that's what I want for myself. Someday I look at people like Iggy Pop, you know, still doing it, and that really inspires me.
Have you thought about outfits yet? Can't wait to see them.
A little bit, yeah. A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, amazing. I can't wait to come and see the tour. Scissor Sisters Arena Tour is going to be out in May 2025. We're in 2024 now, 2025. Jake Shears, thank you so much for coming on The Pieces.
Thank you for having me, Bimini.
Love you lots.
Same.
Mwah.